possible. Roger's also going to share with us his PowerPoint slides, so we'll be able to share those too. So you'll be able to reconnect with the information in several different ways. So what I want to do this morning is I want to introduce my friend and colleague, Roger Sherman. Roger is the director of the Prevent Child Abuse chapter in Idaho. So, you know, he's much more west than we are, and probably has more winter-like conditions than we do in Indiana. But grateful to have Roger here. He's been in that role for a number of years. I've recently got to know Roger a little bit, and grateful for his partnership and what he does in Idaho. And we're all kind of interconnected in this work. We are building a comprehensive network of people to try to bridge gaps and protect children all across our country. So grateful to have Roger to share with us this morning, excuse me. I want to read a little bit about Roger, and I hope he won't blush, but this is what he gave me. So Roger Sherman is the executive director of the Idaho Children's Trust Fund, which is the state affiliate of Prevent Child Abuse America. Under Roger's leadership, the Trust has greatly expanded its efforts to prevent child sexual abuse, introduced new ways of preventing shaken baby syndrome, and engaged educators, physicians, and others around trauma-informed care, PACEs, which is the acronym for Positive Childhood Experiences, and HOPE, Resilience and Strengthening Families. He has worked with schools and other organizations statewide in his current role, and previously as a community organizer from 1979 through 2007. Roger was named the Child Advocate of the Year in 2017 as the recipient of the Jerry Hirschfeld Special Achievement Award from the Idaho chapter of American Academy of Pediatrics. He serves on the boards of the Idaho Resilience Project, Children's Trust Fund Alliance, and Boise Farmers Market. Roger is married and has 3 daughters. So Roger, thank you for being here, for bringing your vast experience and expertise to our forum today and our webinar, and we're grateful to learn from you. I'll tell you that we're going to have a dedicated question and answer period towards the end of the presentation today. And I'll help Roger to monitor that process. If you can, please do keep yourselves muted to allow the most people to hear Roger's message. And without any further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Roger. Roger, it's yours.
Thanks, Jeff. I just want to reiterate some of what Jeff said, not about my experience, but just the realities of the importance of our work together around the country, and the importance of us really learning from each other, as I have from so many of my colleagues. It's been a great adventure. I have to say, I came into this work from another realm, and it was, and a lot of people mentored me and, taught me all the things that, I've had to learn over the years to, be an effective director. So it's been a great journey and continues to be one. I think this field is one that really promotes learning on an ongoing basis, and I find that such a positive thing. And hopefully this will be useful to you all as you are thinking about this. And yeah, we're not having many winter conditions this year for whatever reasons. It's probably 40 degrees outside, and I can't even see snow except when I look really high up into the mountains. So so I don't know, we don't have winter-like conditions like you might expect. And here we are, another I state, but not in the Midwest. You guys are clustered around those ones that get confused with Idaho, but we're kind of out here on our own that way. Anyway, all of that. So we're gonna be talking today. I'm gonna start sharing my screen here. Hopefully that all works. It all worked when we tested it, of course. Are you seeing the screen? Great. So we talk about hope conquers ACEs. This is a way that we in Idaho have developed the way of our thinking about the idea of hope which stands for Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences, Conquering ACEs. And you all, I'm sure, are very familiar with ACEs, and we've all become very familiar with ACEs over the last whatever many years you've had the opportunity to hear about them. And HOPE is really an effort to really start to flip the switch, to start to flip the narrative from one that is focused on the problem to one that starts to look at how we can focus around the solutions and start to build our capacity to build positive experiences. I know this is a pretty big group, so it's going to be a little, but this is a pretty big group. But I would appreciate if people will jump in periodically when I ask a question, or throw it into the chat. And if Jeff, you wouldn't mind if checking out the chat when if people throw something up in there. But do feel free to come off mute and talk when I ask a question if you have something to say, because I'm trying to. I like that interaction, and us being on Zoom always sort of is, or on Teams or whatever we're on, makes us does, I think, make it a little harder to do that. But if you can, I appreciate it, because it will help me. Start out with this picture, and I don't know, some people may have seen this before, I'm not sure, but take a look at it. Think about some of the things that you're seeing in this, and some of the things that stand out for you. We'll take a couple minutes to give you a chance to do that. You go ahead and throw some answers up in the chat, and then maybe if in a couple minutes somebody wants to throw in some things, that'd be great too.
So Roger, we see someone noticed the hole in the wall. Several people did. Okay. Bugs on the walls. Okay. Cigarettes on the floor. Happy chaos. Interesting.
Happy chaos.
Okay. Safety issues. Room not childproof. And I'm not keeping up because there's so many people putting information in. Toys, pets, child sleeping. Religious. Picture on the wall. Cleaners and the cabinet door is open. Smoking. Obviously a baby there. No child caregiver interaction. Thank you everyone for adding your input.
So let me then ask you a question. What are the strengths you see in this picture?
Covers over the outlets. Adult present. The child is reading. It's a family. Food is available. Dinner was provided. Again, the adult is present. Some might say pets are positive.
Okay.
Picture of Jesus as a positive. They have a home. Great point. And they're in the same room. They're spending time together. There actually are cleaning supplies, so that's on their radar for something to do. They have working utilities because the TV's on.
Good point. Okay, so what was easier for you to? What was easier? Okay, what were easier for you to see? Was it easier for you to see risk or protective factors? I think it's obvious, right? I mean, maybe, but would anybody want to come off mute and talk about that for a minute? Was it easier for you to see risk or protective factors when you looked around that room?
I think based on the work we do, it would be the risk factors.
Could I
I
ask?
would agree. I've done this for a long time, but when I first started working for DCS, you're trained to see the risk factors and assess the risk in the home. And then as years have gone by, when we were provided a different kind of outlook, I begin to see far more protective factors when I begin to look for them.
What keeps us from looking for them, Sheila, if you're still willing to talk to me?
So I think, I don't know if, am I unmuted? I think for me, the things that kept me from looking for them was just in the training, you become very conscious of risk and how it relates to the safety. And so because we are so safety conscious, we are kind of trained and predisposed to look for the things that are counter to children being safe. And so we see all of those where we just become very tuned to see all of those things immediately, because that's what we're trained to assess for. And then some of it, quite frankly, if I'm going to be transparent, I'm that kind of person. I think some of my own prejudice and biases contributed to me looking for risk at first.
I agree with Sheila, because the first thing I look is for all of those bad things, because I don't live like that, and I don't relate how could they live like that and things like that. So totally agree.
Yeah. So these are, like Sheila said, and I think what you're alluding to is that these are, we don't live like that. That's not so our biases, come out. So, so we're talking about in this, and we start like this to get us to start thinking, maybe start thinking in some different ways. We say that there is, type 1 thinking, right? Type 1 thinking is this idea that you see something immediately, you have a reaction to it based on your training, based on your experience. It's fast, intuitive, unconscious. It's your kind of ongoing, effortless. You don't think about it. But in that is your implicit bias, right? Is your bias towards, something that, has led you to see things in a certain way. We are, through this process of thinking about positive childhood experiences, to get people to start, to all of us. I mean, I'm not, not by any means, have conquered this, but that we need to move towards that more slow, calculating, conscious, solving a problem kind of thinking. That does take more effort. That recognizes that things are not always as we think they ought to be. And give you a different way of having perspective. There's a bumper sticker I ride by about every day that says, "Don't believe everything you think," and that has come to mean something more to me over time. It's like a silly thing to say, but in some ways it's really true, right? I mean, often we don't think that. I mean, in our minds, our biases are out there first, and often we're not thinking about what is the this is our unconscious view of how things are, right? We immediately have ideas about people, about things. One of the best quotes I've heard recently is goes something like this: our biases are the stories we make up about people we've never met. And, I think that's such a good way of thinking about what our reality is for all of us, really, is that, we have to categorize, we have to build things in a certain way. And so as a result, we think about those things as the way it is, unless we take time to, to think differently. So, this idea of implicit biases are embedded in this type 1 thinking. Again, it's your unconscious, your immediate, your reactions to difference. And, as we start to think about this, and I think what Sheila said, is her over time in her work, she starts to recognize that that some of the things that she would immediately see as safety risks, might be less than that, might be more. I don't know if I'm paraphrasing what you said, but, that she might be able to see the strengths. but I mean, that takes, it is like, how do we start to see strengths rather than, rather than the risks and the the problems that exist in those families. So I like this little metaphor, so I'm throwing it out there for you to see. But how do you see yourself, or your when you think about yourself, how do you think about yourself like this lightning scarred tree? You can throw that in the chat too. That'd be great.
So in spite of the lightning, it's still standing. We are all different, have our own pasts. Resilient. I'm still living and thriving despite trauma. Scarred, but evidence of new growth. Excellent. Shaped by experiences.
And sometimes we see it in this tree, right? We see this lightning scar, we see it still growing. So many of our things, our past traumas, our struggles, our scars are, for the most part, are often hidden, right? We don't see them unless, we talk about them. So, we are like these trees. Anything else there, Jeff? I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. I'm just
there are scarred parts, but there are beautiful leaves. And I would contribute from my own thoughts is that it tells a story about me. It's part of who I am, and maybe why I have the biases I do, and why I do some of the things I do. But it's part of who I am, and it's we should embrace those things.
Yeah, well, we probably don't have well, I suppose we have a choice not to embrace them, but hopefully we will, we do embrace them and recognize that, all our scars are what make us beautiful too. So hopefully that's our way forward. So, so why hope exists? Again, like I think I said a little earlier, we often have this, we've been trained in a lot of ways, to think about risk, and we've been trained a lot of ways to recognize trauma. And in our work, we talk about preventing child abuse and neglect, but in a lot of ways, what we really want to do is build that safe, stable, nurturing environment and relationships that all kids need. That's what the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention talks about, is that we need safe, stable, and nurturing environments and relationships in order to build our families and our kids. We need thriving families and safer children. All of these different ways of thinking about this. But hope aims to better understand and support these, the key experiences of the positive. And so Jeff Linkenbach, who runs an organization called the Montana Institute in Montana, and has been talking about this for quite a while. It has built this concept of the science of the positive. And one of the things he says, which seems obvious, but also I think is not as obvious, is that the positive exists. It's real and worth growing. It promotes health and well-being, allows children to form strong relationships, cultivates positive self-image and self-worth, provides a sense of belonging, and builds skills that promote resilience. And so the idea behind the positive is that, we tend to think about the things we want to fix. And this is sort of trying to take us up that, to that different road. If the roadmap says, what are we trying to get to, not just what are we trying to fix, we might approach many of the problems in different ways. And that's why we have this slide, just, the science of the positive. There's a whole lot of discussion about this out there. Again, many systems focus on the negative, and the idea behind healthy outcomes from positive experience shifts the narrative. People are defined by their strengths as well as their challenges. So we start looking at that. So like that scarred tree, we're starting to recognize that, those scars are the things that make you beautiful. we aren't looking only at, the negative things that we see that are problems. Okay, so this is a blank slide. So think about someone in your life who who personally or professionally, who had a challenging childhood, but is fairly successful or very successful today. So take a couple of minutes to think about, some of those, a person in your life who fits that bill. So what are some of the adjectives you might use to describe that person who who has, and that can be you if that's, that's fine. But what are some adjectives, for what you know about that person and what they're, they've overcome in your mind, they've overcome adversity, they've had a challenging childhood, but, end up in a good place, in spite of, or maybe because of, those experiences.
So we have resilient several times, determined, empathetic, adaptable, driven, strength. They're strong and determined. Showing compassion for others.
Okay, all of those things, right? I always like to put up Oprah just because, I figure Oprah exemplifies, this in such a great way. If anybody's read this, What Happened to You book, that she and Dr. Perry wrote, you can just, you hear her story. I mean, which you may have probably have heard on television, but this is a person who went through a whole lot and has come out of it, with all of those attributes that people discussed, right? So smart, so compassionate, and so successful, and it was built on the foundation of some very difficult things, but she came through that, with a lot of strength. So I don't know how I'm not doing the poll, so maybe I'll just throw it out here that I'm assuming that most people don't know much about positive childhood experiences or PCEs as a concept. Would that be realistic? I think so. I'm I'm going to just assume that it's that this is a relatively new idea for a lot of people. At least as a format. It's not like the idea of positive childhood experiences, if you just said it, wouldn't come to your mind as, yeah, so, okay, sure, positive childhood experiences. We're going to give it a little more, I suppose you're going to say a little more science to it, so you can understand a little more about why, what things have been tested and what we're looking at when we talk about positive childhood experiences as a specific entity, as kind of a antidote, we like to say, to ACEs, to adverse childhood experiences. So one more of these exercises, and this is just to hold in your mind. Think about a positive experience that stands out for you from your childhood. Don't just hold it in your mind for a little bit. And then, we'll, as we talk, think about something that, really has, stood out for you, or that, gave you a sense of, sort of foundational positivity, that is beyond just, just we had fun, but, that really sort of set in motion, maybe you're more confident and your self-esteem and all of those good things. We'll talk about this later. So just to give you some background, the positive childhood experiences study was based initially in the I think maybe a lot of you are familiar with behavioral risk factors surveillance survey, which is done annually. It's where we learned a lot about statewide ACEs, is through the behavioral risk factors survey. And it started in Wisconsin in 2015. They started to ask the questions about positive childhood experiences and came up with a handful of things that we'll look at in a minute, and how it correlates with mental health, and what are some of the positive childhood experiences that made a difference. The 2015 study involved people who are at Tufts Medical Center. Dr. Bob Sege was the lead, and from Johns Hopkins University was Christina Bethel, and Jennifer Jones, who's our colleague at Prevent Child Abuse America, was involved in this when she was actually the director of the, I think of the trust fund rather than the PCA chapter, but I'm not 100% sure about that, when in Wisconsin. So this is where it started, and then it sort of built out of that. These are what have been identified. These were what were identified as we started to talk, as they started to try to figure out what are some things, what is the, when you think about the prevalence of positive experiences, what are some that are foundational? And so these are the ones that were identified and that have been measured as being antidotes in some ways to adverse experiences. So first one is ability to talk with family about feelings. That you felt your felt experience that the family is supportive when you're in difficult times, that you enjoy participating in community traditions, that you have a feeling of belonging in high school, that your feeling of being supported by friends, having at least 2 non-parent adults who genuinely care, and feeling safe and protected by an adult at home. Those things are what are identified that help to shape mental health, positive mental health in adults. And so we see these, and we'll be looking at some of the relationships, but I want to talk a little bit about some of these. I always like to bring up the feeling of belonging in high school, because that seems to be a dividing for a lot of people, like, oh man, that was not really my best time. Anybody want to say anything about that, about their sense of belonging in high school? Because some people will go, well, why would we even think that was a positive experience? But apparently, what it does is that if people feel like they've had a positive experience, it tends to give them a good trajectory into the future as they become adults, and so that's what the linkage is. I think sometimes that our schools are not really geared for the kids who don't necessarily fit into that standard box, right? Who aren't necessarily the kid who, likes the, I don't know, what's our things, football, basketball, pep rally, student government, I don't know, what are some of the things, in high school that maybe are the standard things? The band, maybe theater, some of those things. But there's kids who fall out of any or all of those. Anybody want to say anything about their feeling of belonging in high school? Fabiola, I have you hand up. Go ahead and unmute. Fabiola, did you? I can't see you, so I don't know.
In the chat, Roger, we have the complexity lies in our implicit bias that what we felt was belonging is what others require.
Wow. Wow, yeah. Yeah, people want you to belong, even though it might not make you feel like you belong. They don't ask the right people.
Sarah says, I had a core group of friends in high school that I still have today, 25 years later, a strong support system.
and that's foundational, probably made you feel very much like you had some confidence and self-esteem and all those things that come with, having people around you, having the social connections, as we talk about in the world of protective factors, really critical. And we talk about it here too, and we will in a minute about relationships.
And I see Fabiola has again raised her hand, so please feel free to come off mute.
Thank you. I apologize. I think I pressed the wrong button as I was trying to put my hand down. So I came to the United States when I was about 15 years old. So I was a sophomore in high school. I spoke absolutely no Spanish, no English whatsoever. I'm from Mexico originally. And so I started my high school years very isolated, because it was not just language isolated, but culturally isolated as well. And it was horrible. It was terrible. I think I was in California for 1 year. And then for junior and senior year, I was in Kansas. I was one of very, very few foreign people. And that was really hard. But as you were making the list of what kind of makes up for those hardships, I had all the other stuff. I had adults that I did have a place that I belonged to at church, with church people, and I did have my parents that were very supportive, and my brothers, and so even though it was a terrible time, to not have any friends, to not be able to communicate, to a lot of things, but it taught me a lot, and because I had all those other things, I was okay.
That's great. Thank you for that. That kind of is the story, but that's the story we hope we're going to tell along the way here, right? And help other people, get there as well. Is that, it's great if you have all of them, and but having even some of them, makes a big difference in how your adverse experiences impact you. Right, that they don't, they can be crushing if there are no positive experiences. But having other people in your lives who are helping to support you in other ways can make a big difference. Yeah, I think about this having at least 2 non-parent adults who genuinely care, and I know for me, my best friend's parents, were just different than my parents. My parents were supportive and, so on. But, I could talk about a whole bunch of things with these parents that, with Marge and Dick, who were, who lived about a house over from me. And my best friend, we spent a lot of time just talking to them about things that were, at least as a teenager, made a big difference to me. So, anybody else have any comment on any of these positive childhood experiences, or any of these specific ones that that maybe had a big influence on your life, the way that Fabiola talked about, with her experience?
2 more comments in the chat that I see. Sheila said, I didn't feel like I belonged, but I was engaged in shared activities that gave me connections with other students. And Karen said, I personally had every single one of these things in spades, but I'm very sad to realize that my current CASA foster child does not have a single one, except maybe number 6.
So this is how I think that's a really great way of thinking about this, because this is what we want to start to build, right? Is how do we start to think about with that child that you are that you're working with through the CASA program, how do we help develop some of those kinds of experiences for that child? Because this is a lot of what this is about, is starting to think about how do we shape the environment in such a way that this child has more of those things in their life? Because knowing them means that we can build them. If we don't think about it in that way, there's no way to be intentional about about what we're trying to achieve. So this is what this is the really big thing that they found in a lot of ways, that that people with, these are people with 4 or more ACEs and some combination of positive childhood experiences. And what they found is that those people who said that they had good mental health and only had 0 to 2 positive childhood experiences were way more likely to report depression or ongoing chronic mental health problems when they had fewer positive childhood experiences. And so this is where the science comes in, right? In that the more of those positive childhood experiences, the less likely that they would experience depression. It's not like it's a one-to-one correspondence, or that you would say, oh, X, we talk a lot about fulcrums or seesaws, that there's positive experiences and negative experiences, and they balance out. To a certain extent they do, but it's not like, I have 4 ACEs and now I have 2 positive experiences, now I only have 2 ACEs. It's not arithmetic. It's sort of a preponderance of, when we know that adverse childhood experiences cause toxic stress, and that toxic stress builds, we know that when you have positive experiences as well, that can balance some out. And it's like Fabiola was talking about. She didn't have all of those things, and she had a lot of adverse experiences coming into high school, having not really knowing how to navigate the American system and all of those things that come along with, being new and also being a teenager and all of those things, with that. But she had positive things that helped her to develop as an adult in a positive way. So this, again, very important part of this idea of positive childhood experiences. So, this is a kind of another way of looking at it, that positive childhood experiences help to build resiliency, leading to better health outcomes. So that's kind of our, that's our North Star there. So how much do you know about adverse childhood experiences? Would most people say, you're generally an expert or close? Again, I'm not going to do a poll, so we'll just sort of move through that. But a lot of people anymore. I mean, it used to be, I used to do these presentations that were heavily on ACEs, and man, we do ACE things, and and then people wouldn't know anything about it. Now they know all about it. But then I feel like sometimes we taught everybody too well to know about toxic issues, about adverse childhood experiences, but we didn't teach them enough about how to, I think of ACEs as a diagnosis, right? It just tells us something about what happened to people, right? It didn't tell us what, how to do anything about it. It really told us, that these existed. This is, that the more of these you had, the more difficult it was going to, your life was going to be, and all of those things. And it felt a little bit more fate and destiny and all of those bad things. Although we often said, ACEs are not destiny, or not fate. They are what they are. So just to, quick primer or quick reminder, that ACEs are, these 3 things: abuse, neglect, household challenges, around several family dysfunctions, around all of those different ways of looking at both abuse, or looking at abuse and neglect, and then also at things that create family challenges through substance abuse, misuse, suicidal thoughts, divorce, separation, incarceration instead of a parent, etc. And the big thing that we learned about ACEs, was that they cause long-term impacts. That the outcomes of ACEs are, without any mitigating circumstance, impact all of these things: injury, mental health, maternal health, infectious disease, chronic disease, risky behaviors, opportunities, or impacting, what do we say, opportunity costs, really, in a lot of ways, to what is So we know this about ACEs, right? And this was sort of, I think, the startling part was that it had such an impact on long-term chronic um, chronic disease and long-term health for adults, and that is really crucial that we recognize this and that we not get stuck on it. That's, I think, that's primarily the message of PCEs, is that we not get stuck on this. It's a diagnosis. It's not a cure. And this is what we know about adversity and the building blocks of hope is that in the building blocks of hope is that child abuse and neglect overall disrupts relationships. It disrupts safe home environments. That family disruption disrupts safe environments, home and those social determinants of health. And adverse community environments reduce engagement, reduce opportunities for emotional growth, all of the things that come from, so when we're looking at it within the context of the positive childhood experiences, we're starting to look at this idea that, okay, well, the ACEs impact that safe, stable, nurturing environment in these ways. Does that make sense? Sure. So this was, this is specific. This is sort of flipping somewhat flipping the slide we saw before. That the percent of people with depression or mental health with 4 or more ACEs goes down, depending on how many positive childhood experiences that you have. It was sort of a revelation to me at one point when somebody said to me, ACEs are not trauma. Because I think for a long time, I sort of thought about ACEs as trauma, right? You say, well, these are traumatic experiences. But what I learned, I guess, was that they are not, that they're only trauma if they're not buffered by something else. Right? That trauma, they are experiences unless, we let them fester. If they're mitigated by other things at the front end, they don't have to become traumatic. They don't have to be, they don't have to cause toxic stress. They are actually just experiences. They are things that happen to somebody. How you deal with them and whether they help you build resiliency and growth, or whether they cause toxic stress and negative outcomes, is really dependent on your overall experience and not on your not on the not based only on the experience itself. And I think a lot of times you can see that in terms of like things like divorce. Divorce, it can be very impactful, obviously, and it's not ever going to be fun for a kid necessarily. Although, sometimes it's exactly the right thing to do if you're in an abusive household or, whatever situation that might be better to not have both parents in the house. But in other situations where the divorce is, it isn't done acrimoniously and is done in a way that, people co-parent, that can be actually, can really serve the child and not really hurt them in the long run. So, all of these things are kind of like, again, as I say, it was a revelation to me, maybe not to everybody else, but, that experience, does not equal trauma. It just is adverse. It's something negative. This is really crucial. Research indicates that the absence of positive childhood experiences may be more damaging to long-term health outcomes than the presence of ACEs. And I think that's what you were saying. Whoever said about the CASA experience of the with the child who they have in their care right now, or who they're assisting, that has none of these things, and that is. Is going to be impactful in their life unless we work to turn that around. So any reflections on this one? either come off mute or write something in the chat. Any reflections on this idea that the absence of positive childhood experiences may be more damaging to long-term health outcomes than the presence of adverse childhood experiences? Do you believe it?
I do. I think it's like the children that were neglected, or the whole idea that they weren't being held in orphanages or whatever, just they were fed and they were in cribs, but they weren't being held, and they saw how that was. So I know it's anecdotal, or maybe there's some additional research that supports it, but I think this makes sense in the long time of working with child abuse and neglect. You see that sometimes you got kids that, quite frankly, were doing great in what appeared to be an abusive home, and we may not have attributed to those other things, but they felt like they belonged. They had other connections, they had other things. And so, maybe the physical abuse they experienced was negative. It was not a good thing, but they had so many other good things that were going on. And then you have children who come from homes where they don't have any of those other good things, but they're not getting beat. They're not getting fed. They're just failure to thrive in a completely different way in terms of what you're looking at and not having any words to kind of describe it. I think this is true. And in the field, I think it's just as true as it is, or what the research is indicating is probably very true in our lived experiences.
And I think that's part of what this work, is like, some of these things probably are a little bit on the dust side, because you kind of go like, well, I know that, because, and again, part of putting frameworks around things isn't that, because lived experience, really does tell us many of these things, but maybe gives us more specificity to actually deal with some certain things.
We also have a chat entry from Julie that says, that makes sense, as if a child never experiences anything positive. That will be something that can be detrimental. At least adverse experiences can be made better by the positive experiences instead of all negative. I think, Roger, I would add for myself, on the surface, I'm a little surprised by this comment, but as we talk more about it, I guess that's part of what makes it hopeful for me, is that, we can do something about this, that the positive does outweigh the negative as long as we experience them. So that's.
And if I may, I was doing some reflection last night, and I texted my children and I said, I love you guys. So proud of you. I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I hope that everything you have gone through in life make you a better person and a better man. And my oldest son replied this morning and says, Mom, I don't feel that you put me through anything. I truly believe, looking back and now understanding life as a man, you are a real mother multiplied by 2. All my memories as a kid are amazing, Mom. Everything I think of life as a child is nothing but positive and amazing experiences. Obviously, that is thanks to you. And yes, everything definitely made me a better man. I am noticing and realizing now that it is making me feel better about the past. Past struggles give us future strengths. Love you, Mama.
Oh my gosh, any parent in the room must be, that makes me kind of get all teary, so I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Thanks
So, and I was just sitting, just thinking about stuff, I've been doing these trainings, and that puts you in a lot of reflection as in yourself and as a parent. And I just happened to sit there and to text this to my 2 boys, because my daughter is the baby in between the second child. They're like 7 years apart. And I think when my daughter came to my life, I was more experienced as a parent, and she got the better of me. So, and it's so weird that you're saying that, because I feel as if, as a mother, I could do so many different things as a Latina in my home. My mom will look at you with the sandal, with the chancla, I said, did you hear me or did not hear me, so so hitting your kid, it is not something that unknown, grabbing the bell and said, are you going to sit down or do you want me to help you sit down, so it's not unknown when you get physically hit and things like that. And as a young mother, you practice what you learn at home, so because you don't know better. So anyways, I wanted to throw that in there because that is true. I think that my efforts of making good memories for my children, whatever negative did come in life, I think that definitely helped a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like your kids received both, like you say, I think initially, most of us probably practiced what we experienced, because we, in our being parented. And then, we learn better, better ways of disciplining, better ways of, helping kids along. I mean, I like this sort of distinction between discipline and punishment, that we really never should be punishing our children. We really are not interested so much in like them being punished the way we throw someone in jail, so much as we want to talk about disciplining, which is the concept really of guiding, and helping to, move them towards like, okay, that was not the right thing to do, but, but, we may not be teaching that by throwing the chancla at them or anything else.
Roger, we do have some other very positive feelings and comments about Carmen's, what she shared. So that's a couple of those. But Barbara had an interesting perspective, which is kind of a variation on the theme of positive childhood experiences. And that's the idea of positive adult experiences. That, maybe it's never too late to really benefit from those positive experiences. Just because you didn't have them in childhood, there can still be a positive contribution. So
it's never too late to have a good childhood. That's what I heard that somewhere too. Anything else there, Jeff, that you want to share, or are we good?
I think we've covered it. Yep.
Thank you. But, I think this is an important slide just to, to think about that, because I do think that, when we start thinking about what is our programming, what are we trying to do? How are we trying to do it? Can we think about ways in which we can help build some of these positive childhood experiences for kids? I know some of this is repeat to, learn to repeat, repeat to learn, right? So, by preventing ACEs, by building positive childhood experiences, again, we build resilience and health and increase positive health outcomes. I think we probably kind of covered this in the other one, sort of, again, adult mental health, even in the face of ACEs, it builds positive childhood or builds positive mental health going forward. So this is the framework. So this is where we come to how do we think about positive childhood experiences in the idea of healthy outcomes from positive experiences. The HOPE framework is built around these four building blocks. First, around relationships with other children and other adults through interpersonal activities. Second, through developing safe, equitable, stable environments for living, playing, learning at home and in school. We're going to go through each of these with some more depth. Social and civic engagement to develop a sense of belonging and connectedness, and providing opportunities for emotional growth through playing and interacting with peers for self-awareness and self-regulation. So these are each of the building blocks which come out of those out of those 7 positive experiences, they start to like, now what we're starting to do is to take them apart and to start to look at how they, you know, how they operate within families' lives and children's lives. So again, the first is relationships. And I guess I want to emphasize, because I know Jeff had said, and probably many of you are familiar with the Center for the Study of Social Policy's protective factors. These all interact with that. A lot of the same people who helped develop the protective factors framework have helped to build this. And so it has many of the same aspects to it. I think what they tried to do was to put a little more, I don't know, a little more science to it, a little more sense of that this is, you know, that this has the same kind of or similar kind of evidence to the kind of evidence we have for the ACEs, so that we start to recognize that positive childhood experiences are in fact a thing, and not just, just, I don't know, whatever, however you want to think about it. But again, they're very related to each other. And so I know we kind of go through this discussion a lot about frameworks. The big joke on frameworks that I say about 1,000 times a day is frameworks are like toothbrushes. Everybody has one, but nobody wants to use yours. And and so this is really with the idea that this is a framework. I get it. There are other ones. It's a way of thinking about it. I do think it's a really great one because it gives us sort of it's one fairly easy to conceptualize, and I think it gives us opportunities to build it. So anyway, I digress. So building blocks. So we talk about these building blocks of hope, and the first one again is relationships. It emphasizes the importance of nurturing supportive relationships, early secure attachments. For example, the bond between a parent and a baby are critically important to healthy development. Children also need to have supportive relationships outside of their parents and caretakers, with other adults, and also with peers. And we saw that in those 7 things that were tested. So what are some of the things you might be doing to build this in your work? How are you building any of these things, those things that provide opportunities to be supported by friends or non-parent adults? Or other things that help to build, positive social connections. Or what are the things you could be doing if you don't feel like maybe you are doing them? What are some things you might think of that you could be doing? Because I'm sure you are actually doing these things.
So today I think, this is from Barbara. Today I think perhaps patience. Ha ha ha. Spencer says respecting boundaries and listening to others. And Sheila says making sure children can remain in their schools, even if placed in foster care, so they can remain connected to friends and teachers.
So important.
Sarah says you can be a trusted adult as a professional that assists kids, help find solutions to problems, especially at school.
We work with a program which is, it's run by a guy who's a former gang member who's working with kids who are either potentially or are members of gangs. I know you probably don't believe there are gangs in Idaho, but there are. I know that's sort of like one of those things. It was a opening. It was to me a little shocking too, to be honest, even though I lived here a long time and started to realize that reality for other folks that weren't me, biases there. But the relationships that exist in that in that situation are so crucial. And I see these kids, getting this project works a lot to help kids get their GEDs or their high school equivalency exams passed and so on, so that they at least have that foundational thing. A lot of these kids have, dropped out of school and aren't, the school's not really working for them. And the relationships, are so different. This one adult who's, I think 30, probably 35-ish. But he, has all the tattoos and everything else, but, and has relationships with with the kids in just such a different way than might be available to those kids anyplace else. And you just watch, where how programmatically, and in some ways it's hard to call it a program so much as just something that helps to, it's a program, not a curriculum, I guess you'd say. So, probably doesn't have evidence base. What it has, though, is our recognition of the importance of social connections and relationships in building. And so those kind of programs, in like Boys and Girls Clubs or, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, or, any of these things that are built on, this sort of set of mentorship programs or programs that help to build, to create social connections when sometimes there aren't any. Sometimes as a church community, I think Fabiola has said that, and when we were talking earlier, and, so looking at these things and then looking at, how do we build, how do we, we're talking about building blocks because we want to think about it as something we can build and change, not something that we're stuck with. Any other thoughts? Or programs maybe that you're familiar with, other things that are going on in Indiana that you might be familiar with that, do maybe similar things to what I was sort of throwing out there. Okay, I'm not gonna make us suffer too long because I'm not even a social worker, so I don't have to have that social work pause they talk about. So, but I do. I'm better at it than a lot of social workers, I'll tell you what. So then this next building block is environment, and again, all these things, you can see all the interrelationships between that safe, stable, nurturing environment that the CDC talks about. They've added the word in here of equity or equitable for living, playing, learning at home and in school. And so, all children clearly need that safe, stable, protective, and equitable environment to live, learn, and play. This building block also captures the critical importance of basic needs like food, shelter, clothing, heat, emotional safety. So how do we create? How do you work to create this? This positive environment. And do we see that kind of equity? Or do we see that our environments, our social conditions, are not necessarily equitable?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, I think one thing that's done in this area, I live in Indiana, is that every child can have a free breakfast at school. So you're not singling out those children who don't have those, don't have breakfast at home, that don't have that. So I mean, it's making them feel less different than everyone else.
Thanks for sharing that, Jackie. I didn't know that.
No, and so that definitely is a good thing. For sure. Jackie, okay, Jackie has her hand up, but okay, but she talked. Any other thoughts on, I'm sorry, I kind of got myself diverted, so now I want to go back to that, but I'm gonna go to where we were, so I don't keep throwing you off. So other thoughts on this, in terms of, creating that kind of safe, stable, nurturing environment, protective environment, safe environment, but also one that's equitable. I don't know Indiana well, so I don't want to try to infuse anything there. But if they're, I mean, do we see that, the situations are equitable, are, fair to all kids?
This one's a little touchy at least in our community, because recently 6 children died in a house fire in a home that had people moved out of it because they weren't meeting the standards. And so, and then this family was moved into it and without the repairs necessarily being made. And so it's a little touchy in terms of right in our community right now. But I do think that as a bigger picture, that oftentimes we find ourselves in communities where we could use our voices to advocate for low and moderate housing, and those things happen on the city and county level in terms of when they make decisions by the council and investment decisions, and we don't necessarily think about that. And so, no, I don't know that it's always equitable where people live, but I know it definitely it isn't here in northern Indiana where I live. So.
I just joined. I'm Robin Schomburg, and I taught for 30 years in Marion school systems. And looking at equitable, I also do some other things in the community. And Grant County, I think, does an excellent job in trying to help. But I think where the barriers come sometimes are where are the parents? Where are the parents, in the sense that, are they recovering from alcoholism, drug abuse, some kind of mental health issue? And a lot of times the places where in living, you have to you can't have evictions on your record, or you can't have felonies on your record, or things like that. And because a lot of times they have dealt with recovering alcoholics and drug addicts, and when they have um, given grace and allowed them to move in with their children and things, then things fall apart. And I think we really need to, I think Grant County does an excellent job in rehab and things like that, and giving second chances. And I just think there's a fine line of those where children need homes, but because of their parents' actions, a lot of times they can't get the homes that they deserve. And I don't know how because it goes into an economic issue too, where how much does the government continue to pay for that? Because of course we've got so many things. But as far as Grant County goes, I think they're doing an excellent job in really working with parents and children, and to try and be equitable in those cases. So that was just a statement that I had.
And I think, Robin, part of it is, and this is part of the Prevent Child Abuse America focus is for us, is the idea that, we really need to be working more upstream, and we kind of get into these struggles, because, we haven't really dealt with the problem at the front end, and provided the opportunities, for children to grow up in a way that they then can parent in a way that, that is positive and provides for that thriving families, safer children. And, it's a broader, it's a big discussion, obviously.
There are two more comments, Roger. One from Sarah: resource connection and assisting with application processes that can be difficult is one way that we can engage and be more equitable. Also, Barbara said, when assessing environment, I am sensitive to my measure of safety and stability and meeting people where they are.
Okay. One of the things that we, that's a really particular focus of the HOPE work is actually helping people to figure out things like forms and, so on. I mean, in a really practical way, it's like, how do we make some of those things more friendly, for people so that people don't feel like, intimidated to ask for help or to, get the help they need. I'm sort of bringing this back in because I was thinking about, and I think it's a slide that I had hidden because I was not wanting to get too deep into the ACEs discussion, but I don't know if people, I don't know if people have seen this. This is something that comes out of George Washington University from Dr. Wendy Ellis, who has done work around the idea that environments, we need to look at environments as much as we need to look at those, so the idea is that our standard adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are above the ground. They are the things that are in the leaves and the root, in the leaves of the tree and branches and so on. But that when we look at really environments, we need to recognize that many of the things that cause ACEs are in the soil, are in the dirt, or in those roots. And that the roots of those problems are, some of the ones that, any of us would identify as sort of the social determinants of health, or the large scale problems that impact, communities, and where I think equity really falls short often, is that we that there is poverty and discrimination, and those cause community disruptions, and poor housing quality and violence, and all those things that exist at the root of what often lead to substance abuse, people trying to cope with their lives in various ways that are, what do we say, maladaptive.
Roger, would you be willing to reshare your screen again? I'm only seeing it as a small thumbnail.
Oh, no, bummer.
If you could share again.
Okay, maybe I need to come off share and start again, or what do you think?
Maybe, yes.
All right, let's see. How do I undo that? Stop sharing. Okay, I guess when I went back, I lost the.
I think when you went to your presentation or the slide view, it didn't go back to presentation view, so. There we go. I'm seeing that better.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, everybody. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so anyway, hopefully the description or the discussion was there, even if you couldn't see it well. But that you can see there where the roots of the roots of our of community adversity, and this is the idea that that our environment impacts our family's abilities to really prosper and thrive. Okay. So the next building block is engagement, is the whole idea of social and civic engagement, with the idea that, when children have the opportunity to be involved, to provide service, to do all those sorts of things, that really is a way to build stronger children, to provide resilience, to create opportunities, so that they feel like they do belong and that they matter to the people and the communities around them. And the idea that they're part of something bigger than themselves helps to create a sense of purpose and mattering mattering is one of the big concepts in all of this, that, you know, that we need to create ways that help people to recognize that they matter in a tangible way. Are there things, when you think about your own childhoods, what are some things that you think about in terms of your own engagement or involvement in the community that gave you a sense of belonging or mattering? I come back to Fabiola again, because she said, that she didn't have the school, but she had church, and she had other things that gave her a sense of connection and belonging. Other folks have some ideas about things that that gave them a sense, to help them understand how to participate in community traditions, or in this case maybe the sense of belonging in high school, or this resilience that developed from service, or any of those things that might give you a sense of mattering and belonging.
In the chat, we have Girl Scouts, theater and music, sports, 4-H, band, gospel choir and theater, dance, church. I will say from my personal experience, I didn't appreciate that my parents' friends would often get back to them with news of my misdeeds before I got home. I didn't appreciate it then, but I do appreciate it now, that they took the time and were willing to engage in that way.
We would all be so lucky as to live in communities that do that with our own kids. We always tell that. We always say that you can't get away with anything in this town because we know too many people. Forget it.
And thank goodness I grew up in a time when social media wasn't a thing. All right, we have more in the chat. So cheering and volunteering, family gatherings, growing up in a small town with a strong high school, such as band and sports, family and church. I never knew how lucky I was.
Right. I think we didn't appreciate being dragged to things but it might be that those things that we got dragged to sort of helped to shape our adulthood in positive ways.
And then Robin also added parents visiting friends and taking us, just setting a good example.
Absolutely. How do you think you might be able to, as you think about, the kids you work with or the families you work with, how could you help them see ways that they could help their kids get into this? I mean, we focus a lot, I think, in child abuse prevention work really on parents and how parents can play a bigger role in their kids' lives. And how do you see ways that you might be able to help parents, kind of find ways to get their kids involved and, truthfully, to get themselves involved, probably? Or do you?
Roger, I will say, I think my perception is there's been an erosion of civic engagement over the past couple decades. But I think if you look at civic engagement as engagement with smaller groups of people, more personal relationships, maybe we can start to build a better foundation again for that type of work.
And while there are both positives and negatives about social media, I think we also can see some opportunities for doing that within the social media space landscape. But unfortunately, you're overtaken by, your TikTok community, and which may or may not have much to do with, anything that really creates positive, I don't know, maybe fun. They're fun, but not really purposeful.
Additional comments in the chat. Brianna says if parents had more financial help, it would open doors for their kids to do extracurriculars. Barbara says, I'm deeply involved in this area right now and access is key. Teresa says helping them find low or no cost activities for kids is very much needed. Sarah says that encourage extracurriculars or town city events for families. Sheila says making them aware of community resources. So, and then transportation, another big dividing issue there.
Yeah, so what it tells us though is that those are the things we probably need to be working on, you know, to get to, you know, to increase. I mean, we have the same, but I don't know what it probably depends on where you live in Indiana, whether you have any public transportation or not. I know we certainly have not sufficient anywhere. And, you know, and access to services. Sometimes, you know, we as the Children's Trust Fund have been able to fund some of that kind of work, you know, but, you know, our funds are limited too. And, you know, just trying to figure out some of those things is, but, you know, putting more emphasis in helping other people understand how to transform the way we think about this so that we recognize what are the real priorities for, you know, supporting positive family development. I see Teresa with a hand up.
Hi, thank you. I'm a CASA for Hancock County in Indiana, and we have a program called the Dream Big program, where each of the kids that we are working with get up to $200 a year that they can spend on an activity or some special gift or whatever. But a lot of times it's used on karate or lessons of some sort or some sport, which I mean, $200 doesn't go a long way, but it's certainly more than a lot of these families have. So I really am grateful for that program for our kiddos.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's a really good opportunity. You know, unfortunately, I think all of our stuff right now seems to be too small. But it's like everything we do is important.
Mm. In the chat, Karen shared, I helped one foster student stay in band by paying the fees and getting her instrument repaired. And band is fairly inexpensive compared to most activities, but that's a way that you might be able to make a difference to one person. But it is a difference that, you're planting a seed that might grow and help others too. So.
I mean, we really know the importance of one caring adult in kids' lives, being just the critical, among the most crucial elements of support. And, and you can be that, right? No matter what you're doing. Anything else you wanted to raise, Jeff? Or?
Well, I think of the poem about the starfish and the kid walking on the beach, and thousands of starfish had washed up, and a child picks up one and throws it back, and then picks up another and throws it back, and someone said, why are you doing that? You can't save them all. And it said, well, I made a difference to that one. Yeah. And now that one. And so it's that idea that making a difference to one, the impact is more far reaching than we really know.
But again, the whole idea in this engagement is really the idea that we create opportunities for kids to matter, opportunities for kids to belong, opportunities for connectedness, all of those things that, we know are so crucial. And you look at the Surgeon General's report, if you haven't seen that, on loneliness and isolation. I mean, they call it an epidemic. And I think it's really important for us to help create opportunities, for kids to learn and grow in environments that connect them, one to another. So important stuff. And we're going to do it in a whole variety of ways. Again, the idea behind these PCEs is that we are thinking in terms of intentionality and how we build them. So the last building block is emotional growth, which again, ties to in the protective factors language. We talk about the social emotional competency of children and our ability to develop that. I think this is in that same box. So it's really creating opportunities for social emotional development, and that people need to develop social emotional competencies, which will allow them to constructively navigate adversity and challenges, so helping to build resiliency. And while this often happens through unstructured playtime with peers, it also occurs through interactions with adults who can help identify and name emotions, model appropriate reactions to challenging situations, and so on like that. So all of the things that help to build resiliency and this kind of emotional growth. It has been such a ridiculous development, I think, in politics that we hear people like poo-pooing the idea of social emotional learning, but it's such a crucial part of the of our growth and development as humans, is that we do that. Dr. Sege, who again was one of the people who helped develop this concept, he likes to talk about Foursquare. He says Foursquare is the best game for helping kids to develop self-regulation and their own rules, and that we should stay out of those fights. Nobody knows what the rules are. He suggests nobody really knows what the rules of Foursquare are. So, however you play it, it's really kind of it really helps you to develop those, those concepts of self-regulation and so on, and helping kids to recognize how to work things out with each other, and and so it's probably some combination of those things, where adults can play a significant role in helping kids with emotional growth, but also the importance of allowing kids to have their own time to to develop their own self and relationship with one another. There has been a lot of conversation, I guess, in this space, and I don't know. I'm trying to decide how to walk into this gingerly, because I know people's parenting styles, are all different. But there's been a lot of conversation about the whole idea of how much we, the helicopter parent, versus the what do we call them? What do we call them? The free range parenting and all of those kind of concepts. And I don't know if people have thoughts on this, but it is kind of how we think about this whole idea of how does emotional growth develop. Is it within the context of what level of support do we need to be providing? Yeah. Go ahead. Did someone want to say something? I didn't really form that up very well, but whatever. If there's anybody with thoughts on, kind of how we do work with families to, help them understand how to build, emotional growth in their kids.
One thing that comes to mind, Roger, is there are no perfect parents, but those that are engaged and are in the arena trying to make a difference, that matters. And I think as I've grown myself, I reflect on how I was parented, and I appreciate that my parents were in the arena and engaged with me.
Right, and it's sort of like a question of what level, Sheila, you had your hand up, so.
So I agree absolutely with Jeff that there are no perfect parents. And I think, so my 4 children are all adult. And then I had a period of time where I was parenting 2 of my grandchildren. And my parenting of my grandchildren was very different than my parenting of my children, because my circumstances were very different. And mountains were clearly what were actually mountains, and I did not have the energy to be making molehills into mountains, and I had a completely different perspective. And so I appreciated that experience just so I could get a better and I had learned so many different things just through the years of working. But I agree that we have to, giving people the freedom to to be on the spectrum where they are in terms of parenting, and just helping them to see that every child is different and every circumstance is different. And so their parenting has to have some foundational things that are true. You can't be an absent parent, even if you're in the room. You need to be engaged and connected. And overdoing it does have its detriments, because I will tell you that probably as initially as a parent, I was trying to be the perfect parent, and I was, sticking my two older children into every little thing and running crazy and wanting everything to be perfect. And then it was like, and they didn't even like the stuff I put them in. And I was like, nah, I ain't got time for that. So yeah, so no, there are no perfect parents, but I think we can encourage parents and support them at what in their style, that if they're recognizing and kind of just attuned to and attentive to their child's needs of development, that they can do the right thing by their child or children, all of the above.
Yeah, and
Well said.
I think that's really well said. Really
I
well
will say in the chat, Roger, we also have Sarah. I think a balance of engagement and encouraging independence is good. And Robin said, I know now why we are younger when we have children, because as grandparents, I am much more lenient.
I don't know if that's bad. You probably need both. I think that's what grandparents must be for. I'll be interested to see when I get to be one. I hope I get to be one. Those were the 4 building blocks. Oh, Fabiola, you want to jump in? I think you must be on mute.
Oh, hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I talked to my daughter. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and she was telling me she had some encounter with she was just not happy about something, and that she didn't want to listen to this adult anymore. And I said, well, when you're home with me, you listen to what I have to say, even when I ask you to do stuff. And she looks at me and she says, yes, but that's because you'll talk to me like a person, like I'm a person. And I thought, you know what I mean? She's like, well, a lot of the times they talk to us like with little kids, but then they want us to do big things, as teens. And so as a parent, sometimes just talk to your child, not exactly as an equal, because they aren't, but as a person that has, the ability to think for themselves. And that makes a big difference when it comes to whether they will do what you ask them or not.
Very wise. A lot of wisdom in that conversation. My kids are now 20, and I have twins who are 20, and a daughter who's 28. So I have 3 girls, and I think it's been interesting, that journey as they get to be, adults, and us accepting them as adults. And even at 15, you're starting to feel that way, even if you're not really that way yet. So earlier, I'd asked you to put in your mind a positive childhood experience that you had had, and to think about that. And now we're coming back around to it to see if you could put that positive childhood experience that you were thinking about into one of these building blocks. Did you think that it did relate to one of those? And maybe throw some things again in the chat, or talk about it for a sec if you got. I know I'm making you put all these things in the chat. I'm making you work hard. It's a big list out there. Hopefully it's helping you to see how you can use this. And that's my main point in trying to ask the questions and see how we can make it relate more to what your day-to-day is. Or your own experience of parenting, or whatever your situation is. Or if anybody wanted to tell us, what the thing they were thinking about when they thought about it, and then maybe, how it might have related to one of these 4 building blocks.
Okay, I'll jump in again.
You're saving me,
But,
Sheila. You're saving me a lot.
I'm an interactive kind of person. In fact, I
Love that.
hate Zoom trainings because a lot of times we don't get to interact, and those are very difficult for me. And so if you give me a chance to say something, I'm probably gonna. But so when you raised it and you asked us to think about our childhood experience, I didn't realize some of the things that anyway, mine was there was a person who kind of ran a club at our church when I was a kid. And I remember when I first, so I had an amazing mother. I did have an absent father, but amazing mother who was a teacher, raised 8 kids, yada, yada. So I really felt like I had a decent childhood. I had some stuff, but everybody does. But this person, and I remember when I turned, it was like you had to go from 12 to 13 before you could get into this club, but it was in our church anyhow. And she was just amazing. And she poured into me so much. She was the first person, so we had a very big extended family, and outside of my family, that really kind of saw me and the gifts I had, or things like that. And to this day, and I won't say how old. I would say how old because I ain't ashamed, but at 65, I still will Facebook this person's in Atlanta now, and I will send her, it's like, do you remember? Because it was something that was that impactful, but it was an adult who was, and it was relationship, but it was an adult who wasn't my parents or my aunts and uncles, who were also very cool people and in my life, but it was someone outside of that family system that was that, and it was very impactful. Yes.
And so that kind of fit in that whole box of relationships and what, and the importance of those kind of relationships and in your positive childhood experience of that. Yeah. Perfect.
Roger, we have a couple examples or stories in the chat. Robin said, my dad surprised us when he came home from the Vietnam War. My parents were divorced. My mom allowed my dad to stay at our home so he could visit with us until his leave was over. And then Karen added, my own experience of parenting my 2 daughters and now my 5 grandchildren is to provide them with my unconditional love, support, and encouragement. Being there with authentic compliments and positive feedback is the most important thing I can do. I see what this did for me and want to do the same for them.
Again, the importance of relationship, and yeah. Desiree. Oh, okay. I see Desiree's hand up.
Yep.
I truly appreciate all the positive feedback that we've gotten from people sharing their stories of, they've had an adult who was there for them, who kind of took them under their wing, or they had a parent that really, just kind of continued to affirm them. I struggled with that because I didn't have that when I was a kid. I remember telling my mom I wanted to be a missionary, and she, I could feel the ire from her. There were things that I wanted to do, but everything that I wanted to do was dampened to the point where I believe today I struggle with finding my purpose. Yes, I can do the job, but it's just, I've never had that person who would feed into me. Even as I was coming up in life, no adult actually stood beside me and encouraged me. And so we have these kids out there who are in the same kind of predicament. I often say that in my work, I give people what I never had. And so I have to be mindful that I have to be kind and gentle and loving, in spite of the fact that I didn't receive that same kind of experience.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you for doing what you do, because I think that's, I think that people react to their adverse experiences in a couple of ways. I mean, they tend to either react by being angry and being you know, having a lot of things that are negative, or they do what you do, which is what you've done, which it sounds like is to shift, you know, to recognize what you didn't have and help build it in others. And that's, you know, and I thank you for doing that.
Roger, I will share a couple things. One, my experience that I remembered from my childhood was getting together with my mom's side of the family, and they were a very Irish group, and there was usually a lot of alcohol flowing, but they were always laughing and playing music and smiling, and that was a very fond memory, and I realized that the seeds of and value of family was kind of planted in me at a very early age. And I will say that my mom is still with us, and she is at the point of her life where she's asking questions to me about how she did as a parent, and me just affirming her and telling her, Mom, you know, I think you did the best you could, and you did many, many good things. So I think that's something we can do too, is we can go back and we can interact and affirm those that have been a part of our life and emphasize the positives, and maybe try to not emphasize the negatives quite as much.
I mean, the letter that I'm trying to remember the name of the person who read it to us, but that was so affirming of that situation, right? That, you know, maybe as children, maybe as parents, we're really hard on ourselves, and you know, our kids didn't experience it in the same way we experienced it, and maybe we feel like we probably always feel like we could do better, but could have done better, or could do better, and you know, and they don't see it that way. That they find, you know, that they're left with the positives, and that's hopefully all, you know. hopefully that's the, you know, for most of us, we can do that.
Sarah put in the chat, my parents and I lived overseas for the first 10 years of my life, pretty cut off from the extended family. So when we moved to the States and started spending time with them, it was like a whole new world. Very fun and fond memories.
Cool. Yeah, so those positive experiences, I mean, they go into those, you know, again, into some of those boxes, into some of the, you know, your experiences at church, your experiences with providing, you know, some service, all of the kinds of things that are in these building blocks, and thinking about how we build them in other people. So, so anyway, you know, anything, did you find anything in this whole discussion surprising? Was it, you know, you know, I mean, looking at these questions, you know, anything surprising, anything that, you know, did you find these building blocks easier to connect to? I think some people talked a lot about relationships, which seemed to, you know, kind of to resonate with everyone, is the importance of relationship. And I think there's no question that that's pretty much the most important thing in our world, you know, is the social connections and what they do to support and help us grow. Are there things that, you know, so did you find this, did you find anything surprising? Did you find anything that was, you know, that you hadn't thought about before, or, you know, that you would hope would be, you know, that you might take away with you today?
Well, I was gonna type it in the chat, but I was gonna ask Jeff if we were gonna have access to the PowerPoints. In my role, I think that if I could share just those first two slides, the fact that, especially, you know, so I work for telehealth, how we are so prone to only see risk. I think just exposing people and giving people a shift in that very first exercise. So that was surprising, and not surprising, but it was definitely new information and a great experience. And so overall, I think the whole presentation has been enlightening for me. I knew some things about positive childhood experiences, but I've learned a whole lot more. And so, yeah, but that would, in terms of harder to connect to, I think that big picture kind of stability, environment, housing kind of situation, I'm a little not struggling there, but it's like, do I really have any influence, or do I have anything in that arena? And other than making sure my own little grandkids are safe and stable, et cetera. But yeah, I think I found the presentation to be very enlightening and helpful, practical, and just gave some really good information. And so again, I was just going to ask about the PowerPoint, which you shook your head, so sounds like we will address that. But yeah, very good.
I'll send it as kind of the worksheets, so that rather than as the slides. But yeah.
And I will say that the presentation itself is being recorded and can also be accessed on our website. So you'll have the slides and the presentation to refer to. I will look in the chat here, and I see Matthew said, all is very good food for thought. Karen said, nothing surprised, but I'm still left struggling how to help my current CASA. In the system since age 4, now 16, quit school recently, got her GED. She wants to fill any of these gaps if possible. Everyone in her life seems temporary. Teresa says, the presentation reinforced that I need to help my kiddos get connected socially. Paula said, ACEs are not a diagnosis or a destiny. They are just what happened. Positive childhood experiences can mitigate the impact of ACEs. Absolutely. Matthew said, great information and presentation. Armelia, the black and white photo used at the beginning, can we have a copy of that? Oh, got it. Barbara said, I have a very difficult case with over 7 ACEs, and I am searching for keys to help her. This gives me encouragement to keep trying. And Fabiola said, I'm a home visitor and work with moms. I now have a lot of good things to share with them after this presentation.
Cool. Our home visitation program has adopted a lot of this, so trying to get them to think that way. The fortune I have is that the current lead of the statewide effort on home visitation of the McVie program used to work for us, so so I love that she gets it, which is really great for us. I'm just going to throw out just a few things, that think about, and I think I'm sort of hitting time limits, so I should probably just whip through a few things. I always I brought Oprah back in just to, think about that person who's, who we know, who had adverse experiences, who also grew and, became like that lightning scarred tree, whose beauty is evident and whose scars may or may not be evident, but we all got them, There are tons of resources at positiveexperience.org, which is the Tufts Medical Center's the National Resource Center for Hope. So there are a lot of opportunities at that. Let's see, yeah, there it is on there. The positiveexperience.org website there, and there's lots of material there. There's an upcoming summit with Hope that is online. So that's coming up with a lot of expertise from a variety of places, and I'm proud to say there's a group from Idaho who's going to actually be presenting there at this national summit. So that's cool. But like I say, lots of materials at positiveexperience.org, and there's opportunities for training and opportunities for other things, beyond what we talked about today. So I guess that leaves a few minutes for open questions, if that's what we had in mind. And hopefully, like Sheila said, you've had a lot of opportunity. I mean, we've given opportunities for interaction throughout, so it hasn't been quite maybe the Q&A-ish kind of questioning. But if you have questions that are about any of this, I'm here right now.
Roger, this is Catherine King. I'm the administrative assistant for Prevent Child Abuse Indiana.
And I just wanted to let everyone know that after the webinar, we'll be sending out a short demographic survey. And then I will be emailing you your training certificate and any of the handouts that Roger happens to send to me. I'll forward them on to you. And there'll also be a link to our website where you can watch this webinar again. Just a little ending speech. Thanks for attending.
And share it, because we're the whole point of all of this is really to get the information out there, to spread hope.
Several people thanking you in the chat, Roger.
I do have a question though. So how do you handle when you are dealing with children in processing with them, and you are trying to bring up those good memories, even as little as they can be, but they don't see it? It's like, it's not, I understand everything they've been through, and I don't want to say the negativity takes over, but then how do you deal with that, with trying to turn that negativity into a hope, and trying to help them see that, okay, so I know everything what is happening, but can we talk about some of the positive that you have had in your life and things like that, and there's no turning around, especially when you're dealing with teenagers and older children?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm an expert in that as much as some other people might be, but I think we have to recognize that whole thing about the way in which our brains operate, too, that Dr. Perry talks about, this neurosequential idea that we really have to get to the emotional part of this first, right? And help kids to work their way through, their feelings before we can start having conversation about the reasons, the reasoning side of it, to get them to think about what are some of the positive things. And, I think giving kids an opportunity to express their feelings and not be judgmental about it, and give them that opportunity, helps to open up those conversations in a way that, gets to the root of it. It's not, none of this is simple if kids have been through a lot of stuff. And, I don't know if you've seen this, but, we're seeing suicide in younger teenagers, and it leaves me very bereft, because I feel like, how can you get to a place, at that young, where you feel like there's nothing left in the world for you? So I guess I'm with you, and hopefully some of your other colleagues, probably have more, to add to that. But I guess it's like getting to their feelings first and being open to that, and then helping to, to shift that, to help them see that all the things, that it wasn't like there's been nothing in their life that has been positive.
Right. I'm DCS, and sometimes we don't have the experience to do therapy or anything like that, conversation that sounds or feels like therapy. And at that time when you are with that child, you just want to do a general talk in a positive way, and you realize that nothing that you say, it's valid, it's been valid for this child. I mean, and you can see this a lot in angry teenagers, and things like that. So sometimes a little bit difficult, and it's not that you don't want to listen to their feelings, but it's just that at that time, you're just trying to be supportive and in a positive way, more than letting them go on the negative, which can make them sometimes more angry.
Mm.
Well, and sometimes we're not the right messenger, and that's part of the thing that's a problematic thing here. Maybe it's a peer, maybe somebody else. I mean, we haven't really given us all the tools, and so you're walking into a situation where you're you know, you might not be the right person to be dealing with this because they don't see you as, I mean, it's a hard job that you have, you know, in your, you know, as DCS. And I think people, you know, don't necessarily, you know, immediately relate to that. But how do we, maybe there's ways that DCS could rethink how they do it so that they give you, you know, more tools to help those kids out. I just, you know, I just think sometimes we're not, you know, we have certain jobs to do, and, you know, and you have certain jobs to do, and they're not necessarily the ones that, you know, every kid in every situation needs at that moment, you know, so.
So
Thank you.
Armelia
Thank you.
had a comment, and I think this might, you know, be helpful, Carmen. It was validate their feelings. Once the conversation grows, ask questions about their goals and plans. This can help guide the conversation to one of hope. So thank you, Armelia.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good, you know, it's a good, yes, great.
Well, we just have a couple minutes left. I want to thank everyone for making time in their schedule, and I hope you found a few nuggets of information that will sit with you and maybe motivate you to take action steps to apply the information. So it wasn't just a good couple hours spent, but it actually gives you, you know, something to use. And I want to say again, we wanted to do these during February because we're rolling towards the month of April, which is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. And while the topic of child abuse is very difficult and draining, topics like this that undergird child abuse and can help with primary prevention and upstream prevention are very uplifting. And so we're hopeful that this, you know, helps to kind of roll us in a very positive, thoughtful mindset towards the month of April as National Child Abuse Prevention Month. Prevent Child Abuse Indiana will be having a kickoff event that we will live stream on the 1st of April. We have our annual Matt Bremen run, which is a fundraiser. It's in Indianapolis. It's along the canal, so it's usually a lot of fun, family-friendly, pet-friendly event. So if you want to come out, foster parents get in free. If you are a kinship family, they get in free as well. So would love to have people there. You know, make it a very encouraging time as well. And then on our webpage, again, pcain.org. We will have events calendar for what's going on around the state. We have 56 local child abuse prevention councils across Indiana that represent 62 different counties. So 2/3 of the counties in Indiana have representation by a local child abuse prevention council. So if any of this information motivates you to want to do more and get more engaged, check out our website. It says find your child abuse prevention council, and it can tell you where councils are near you, if they're active, and if they're not, then contact us and let us know how we can help you start a council. They are the local voice of child abuse prevention, and that kind of know what child abuse prevention looks like in your county. So thank you everyone for your participation. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And I'll stick around for a couple more minutes here if you have questions or comments. But Roger, thank you for contributing to our series this month.
Well, thank you for all the participation you gave because it saves me. I'm just really, it's really hard for me when people don't interact. So I really appreciate it. Sheila, thank you. You're my hero, your heroine for the day. But other folks too. A lot of people did in the chat, and I appreciate that a lot because that makes it a much more lively, rich conversation. And that's really what we're about, is sharing this together. So thank you. Have a beautiful day in Indiana.